Welcome to Wednesday, everyone. It's April 23rd. I'm Vineet Brach here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Here are your top stories this afternoon. Well, Election Day is coming up on Monday, and federal party leaders are busy making their final pitches. Liberal leader Mark Carney is in Victoria. He says with ongoing tensions and threats from the USA, it's important to further invest in BC's strengths.
We'll create the first and the last mile fund that will connect critical mineral extraction projects to our supply chains to get them to market. In other words, from rock to road and rail.
This afternoon, he will travel to White Rock and New Westminster before holding a rally in Surrey. BC is seen as an important battleground in this election, with the Liberals and Conservatives trying to win over those seats held by the federal NDP. And fire crews have been busy battling a massive fire in East Vancouver today. It tore through 3 businesses. Fire crews say they were all called to a business on fire shortly after 4 a.m. on East Hastings Street between Nanaimo and Lakewood Streets. Crews say 7 people were evacuated and no injuries have been reported.
It was quickly upgraded because of the progression of the fire and smoke that was extending into multiple structures. So now we've got the 2 storefront structures, businesses, the single-story ones, and the adjacent structure, which is compromised and on fire, experiencing fire damage.
Vancouver Fire and Rescue Crew Services say an investigation is ongoing, and East Hastings Street between Nanaimo and Lakewood Streets is still closed off in both directions. Officials are urging people to stay away from that area. And West Shore RCMP say they're searching for a man who went missing after a boating accident. Police say 43-year-old Ryan Mazar has been declared missing. He is described as being 43 years old with short gray hair and a large tattoo on his arm. Police say there were 3 occupants on the boat who were thrown overboard during that accident. A mother and an infant were located and rescued. And rescue officials say they are continuing that search near Finlayson Arm, and police are asking anyone with information to reach out. Also, if you're in the Saanich area, police are warning people about an active cougar. We do have a video to share here. The big cat was spotted in a tree on Epco Drive near the airport just after 5 o'clock yesterday evening. But by the time police got there, it had moved on. Now, RCMP are warning people to take caution with small children and pets and to give the cougar space if it is spotted again. The BC Conservation Service has been notified. Okay, now after lots of speculation, it is official. Vancouver is getting a new hockey team. The Professional Women's Hockey League will expand to Vancouver and begin play next season. The league has just announced, and the league's executive vice president of business operations says they chose this city partly because of the region's commitment to the growing sport.
BC Hockey's efforts have been huge in growing the game, and we want to help build and continue that momentum that you've already started. You have a vibrant and engaged corporate community, one that we think is inspired by sports and what happens in sports. Listen, I think you saw in that video and you saw by our youth team here, your fan base is engaged, it's vibrant, it's fun, over 19,000 people at our game here.
The team will play their games at the Pacific Coliseum on the PNE Fairgrounds. It can seat more than 16,000 fans. Other teams in the league are from cities such as Toronto, Montreal, and Boston. And that's what we have for you so far. I'm Vineet Brach. BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Election day is fast approaching. And throughout the campaign, we've heard about a generational divide among voters. We'll hear from a youth panel in just a moment and a seniors advocacy group at 12:30. And we'd love to hear from you. What issues matter most to your generation? Plus, immigration lawyers say they're getting more calls from LGBTQ plus Americans hoping to move to Canada. What are their concerns and what are their chances? We'll talk to a Vancouver lawyer at 12:45. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Party leaders are fanning out across the country again today, trying to shore up more support. We're asking you this hour, what election issues matter the most to your generation? Whether you are Gen Z, Gen Y or Millennial, Gen X, or a baby boomer, we would love to hear from you. Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, polls have suggested younger voters care the most about cost of living and housing issues. I have two young guests to start with me now. Cole Reinbold is Secretary-Treasurer with the BC Federation of Students. That is a nonpartisan association. And Jessica Moorhouse is a financial counselor and author of Everything But the Money, The Hidden Barriers Between You and Financial Freedom. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
And to start, let's make clear, neither of you is a member or has publicly endorsed a political party. So we're coming at this from the issues. And Jessica, I'll start with you. Working as a financial counselor, you have focused on Gen Z and millennials or Gen Y. What are the biggest issues that you're hearing about from these generations?
It really is those, core issues, the kind of foundational elements of money. And so cost of living, housing, like you mentioned, are front of mind, probably ahead of everything else. People just want to be able to afford their next trip to the grocery store, be able to catch up on their bills, pay off their debts, pay reasonable rent. Rent, depending on where you live, it can be very expensive, or, actually fulfill that dream that a lot of us Canadians have, such as home ownership. And it just seems like, especially when we compare to where we are now to 10, 15 years ago, some of those things are an impossibility for a lot of people. And so that is, I think, some of the biggest issues that Gen Y, Gen Z are dealing with right now.
And we have heard so much about the U.S. and Donald Trump's tariffs and talk about the 51st state rhetoric and that kind of thing. How much is that resonating with people you speak to?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a really important part. Like, we are Canadians and we are a very different country than the U.S. And I think, though, because we are such close neighbors and we have such an important relationship, to see what's going on right now is really concerning and worrying a lot of people. And so when people are going to the polls, they are looking to make sure that we are going to vote in a government that is going to address that is going to protect our sovereignty, that is taking this very seriously. And I think most important is that people want to make sure that we're not going to replicate some of the things that maybe we don't agree with down south. We want to make sure that we are our own country. We are doing what's good for our citizens. And so I'm seeing that and hearing a lot of that from people when they're making a decision. Very well, if this hadn't happened, the situation hadn't happened, they may have voted differently. So it's really fascinating just to see how quickly certain people are maybe changing their minds or, changing their priorities.
And Cole, what about for yourself and the post-secondary students that your organization represents? What are the concerns on their minds?
Yeah, so the top concerns for students right now going into the election is the rising cost of post-secondary education, housing, and basic needs that make it really hard for young people to get ahead. And government investments just simply have not kept pace with these growing challenges. Young people are juggling tuition, rent, groceries, and often 2 or 3 jobs just to keep up. We're doing everything we're supposed to, but the system isn't working for us. So the biggest issues that we're facing are rising cost of post-secondary education and housing.
Wow, the system isn't working for us as you're supposed to. And how much does that resonate with you, Jessica?
Yeah, the system, I mean, I think it's been broken for a long time. There's still a lot of things that, I'm very happy to be a Canadian. There's a lot of things I'm so grateful for. I have a lot of friends in the US and they've lost a lot of, freedoms, and lots of policy changes are really affecting their jobs, their personal finances. And I think a lot of Canadians are looking to that and looking to our government to see, well, we need to not just not be like that and roll back some of these things. We need to be better. And we want to, really make sure that it's clear what our values are as a country, and supporting one another. And so, although I mentioned that big priorities are cost of living and certainly housing. Also, a friend of mine is things like healthcare, because again, we're seeing what's going on in the U.S. with their healthcare system. Although our system is not perfect, and we absolutely can do better. That's still something that is really important to our country. So, across the board, there's so many issues, but what I am seeing, prominently are some of those core important things, just to make sure that we don't become that 51st state that no one wants. No one wants that in our country.
Oh, that's interesting because Cole, for yourself, when you hear that and the backlash against the 51st state rhetoric, is that weighing on the minds of people that you talk to?
Yeah, so it's definitely top of mind for students, the 51st state rhetoric, tariffs and everything. Students are engaged, politically inclined. But what is front of mind for students right now is keeping a roof over our head, food on the table, and staying in post-secondary. Things are so unaffordable right now that is one of the only things that students can think about is living day to day.
And we know you mentioned post-secondary funding. The federal government under the Liberals have cut back on international students, being limited in terms of numbers. What impact will that have on the post-secondary institutions and for access to education for Canadian students? Is there an impact there?
Yeah, so there's a huge impact made by the cuts from the Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada ministry earlier last year. And so what that did was that cut the amount of international student study permits that were allowed in Canada. And this has caused a huge trouble in post-secondary institutions across Canada. And so institutions that were having issues after COVID from lower international students, now those issues have absolutely crumbled. They've turned to ash. So what we are seeing is budget crisis at post-secondary institutions across the country. And this has only been exacerbated by the changes that the IRCC implemented last year. So what the federal government needs to do is fund post-secondary by the means of increasing social transfer payments to the provinces for post-secondary institutions.
Okay, now you both mentioned housing, trying to keep a roof above your head. Is there anything that's sticking out for you from the party's platforms, Cole?
Yeah, so something that I've noticed across all the platforms is that there's a lack of generational fairness. So policy decisions consistently prioritize older generations without adequately investing in the needs of younger ones. And so what we're not asking for the older generations to lose or not get the funding that they need. We're asking for a future that's fair and one where the next generation has the same shot that our parents did at a stable, secure life. So, for example, currently the federal budget's new spending for old age security is $71 billion, whereas housing and post-secondary is only $6 and $5 billion respectively. And you can see clearly through this that younger generations are not being invested in. So that's what I've seen throughout the platforms is that younger generations are not being invested in and politicians aren't speaking to younger voters in their platforms.
Jessica, what about yourself? Is there anything in any of the platforms that addresses that question of generational fairness that Cole has raised?
Yeah, I'd actually completely agree with what Cole said. I think a lot of what we're hearing is focused on maybe older generations and not really putting, young voters, which are so important in this election, at the forefront and really addressing some of their struggles. wild when I think about myself in my 20s. I was really concerned about housing, and it is so disheartening that not only is that still a concern, but the concern has grown, and the issues and affordability is so much more out of grasp than it was for myself when I was, just a young post grad. What I do feel like is a lot of the things that we're hearing is that, oh, we're going to address this, has to do with home ownership, which is absolutely important, but there's not as much conversation about renting. Rent, there's, obviously depends on what province you live in, but sometimes there's a lack of, stability when it comes to raising rents, making that more unaffordable, pushing certain people, out of maybe the cities because they can't afford it and having to move out. There absolutely needs to be, I think, more affordability and policies in regards to that, because not everyone wants to own or can afford to own, and so but we still need to make renting affordable as well.
Okay, now, and so on that sort of focus on home ownership, Cole, both the Liberals and the Conservatives promised to eliminate the GST for first-time home buyers. The Liberals on new and majorly renovated homes under $1 million, and the Conservatives on new homes up to $1.3 million. What do you think of that? Does that give you a sense that, okay, this is going to make buying a home more within reach for young people like myself?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent policy for the middle class, but it simply doesn't do anything for students and young people. Young people aren't going to be buying brand new homes, so this GST cut on brand new or largely renovated homes isn't going to benefit young people. Again, it's excellent. Similar with the tax cuts that we're seeing, which will save a household income that makes around $90,000 a year on over $1,000 for some parties. That is excellent. I can't name a single student that makes $90,000 a year. So these are excellent policies for the
Jessica
middle
is laughing.
class.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's true.
but
I don't know.
simply not for students.
I'll ask both of you as we wrap up here, what do you think of voter turnout? What do you expect when it comes to young voters? This has always been an issue. Do you think this election, we've heard it's the most consequential election. That's what we've heard from various people. Will that affect the voter turnout among young people, Jessica?
Absolutely. I mean, at least I'm looking at some of the numbers and seeing some of the conversations online. I am seeing a lot more momentum with younger voters, especially when we're looking at the numbers for the advanced voting. That was definitely very inspiring, and it made me excited to see that if those are the numbers, such a big increase from 2021. I'm very, hopeful for election day, and I'm hopeful that, again, talking like this, and people will, start talking to their coworkers, their friends, and really, understand how important this particular election is. I feel like this is one of the most important we've had in a very long time, and to go out there and vote because you need to have your voice heard.
And what about you, Cole? Among post-secondary students, are you hearing more talk or more interest, more engagement in this election?
Yes, I've worked several nonpartisan Get Out the Vote campaigns in my time as a student leader, and this is definitely the most engaged that I've ever seen students be on campus. Youth are politically engaged, inclined, and we are ready to get out and vote. And an important fact is that youth ages 18 to 35 actually make up the largest voting bloc in Canada. So we have the power to change this election.
Really good to hear from both of you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cole Reinbold is Secretary-Treasurer with the BC Federation of Students. That is a nonpartisan organization. And Jessica Moorhouse is a financial counselor and author of Everything But the Money, The Hidden Barriers Between You and Financial Freedom. Okay, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Whatever generation you belong to, whether you are Gen Z or Gen Z, I'm not sure, still not sure which way we call it, or millennial, Generation X, baby boomer, we would love to hear from you. What are the most important election issues for your generation? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Let's go to the callers now. And Frank is joining us from Williams Lake. Hello, Frank. Welcome.
Good afternoon. How's it going today?
Really well. I'm glad that you've called in. What are your thoughts on the generational issues?
The generational issues for me, I am a tail end baby boomer. So that's my position. Mm-hmm. My wife and I live off of pensions. That's our sole income. Mm. For me, the issues in this election are government debt. I keep going over in my head the 1.4 trillion and 54 billion numbers. And those just stick in my head like I just can't get them out.
Why?
Anyway, what's that? Why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the 54 billion, that's the service on the debt. And for every dollar that we pay into our debt, that's money that could go to social programs, job creation, you name it. But lo and behold, it's going to pay down our debt.
Frank,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. and as someone who is a senior living on a pension, that's a concern for you.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
The second thing for me is affordability. Because we live on pensions, and yes, we get a cost of living increases year by year, but they always seem to lag behind. And when we go to the grocery store, the gas pumps, or anywhere, we just seem to get further and further behind. And anything that we can do to lower the cost of living, the drop of the carbon tax is a good step in the right direction. And one more thing that I should point out about the first thing that I mentioned is the size of government. So you may call me on this one, but I believe the government over the last, since 2015, has increased by over 44%. Now, in my opinion, that's way too high. Government should have enough government to do the job and not create more unnecessary payments to that effect.
Okay. And a quick fact check of that does show that is correct, 40% increase in the civil service. Frank, thank you so much. Good to hear from you in Williams Lake. Peter is next now in North Cowichan. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Yeah, what are the biggest issues for your generation?
Okay, I'm 72. I'm a boomer. I'm just getting my shot right now. My big thing is that the progressive taxation, which is one of the major problems and one of the reasons for the housing crisis, one of the reasons for the the deficit that the previous caller was mentioning. I should be paying a lot more taxes because of my relatively high income at the moment, even from my retirement savings. And I think, people who are in a much lower income should not be paying nearly as much tax. A lot of Gen Z people do not remember, because they weren't around, the years in late 80s when the Conservatives, Brian Mulroney, increased the tax on the lower incomes and decreased them on the upper incomes, and as well as a few other things. It brought in the GST, which is a regressive tax, and the other thing that they don't know about is, for example, the carbon tax was a progressive tax. People making less than $80,000 a year usually got more back from their in refunds than they would have paid in their carbon tax.
So what we heard from a previous caller was that eliminating the carbon tax is something that helps. You're saying it should not have been eliminated.
No, because the lower income people paid very little on it. They got most of it back. Now, it varied from province to province, because I think BC and Quebec weren't covered by the federal one. However, for just in the national case, and I honestly don't, because of the need for more progressive taxation, I certainly wouldn't vote Conservative at this point. And I was a Conservative lifelong until 2006, but the people, given the incredible funding that the Conservatives Party got for their last 2 years of hate propaganda, it's very doubtful that they would lower the taxes or raise the taxes for the very high income people.
Peter, thank you for the call as well. I have a couple of minutes left. We are going to take more of your calls after the news update, but right now Rick is on the line in Victoria. Hi, Rick.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I think we should focus on taxing how the money is made. Currently, if you make money by trading money for money, you're taxed less than half the amount you'd be taxed if you made all your income trading your time for money, and time is finite. The capital gains tax break for the investing class is paid for by the working class, which disincentivizes work because you can make more money just from investing. I think, of course, there should be an exemption of some sort for sweat equity, low-income pensioners, and, of course, maintain the capital gains exemption for primary residences. But make the change revenue neutral so that the proceeds are used to lower taxes for the lowest earners. This puts less pressure on small businesses to pay minimum wage, which is a cost that's passed on to the consumer. Instead, those workers would have a higher take-home wage, and then they're struggling less and they can focus more on health and personal growth, etc. They also help to reduce the speculation of housing because investors won't get a tax break compared to people who contribute to the economy.
Because it would be an investment. Do you see anything in the platforms that addresses that kind of, I think you would call it tax fairness?
Not really. Like NDP said they would bring back the capital gains inclusion rate to 66% or whatever. I think that needs to be cleaned up to, again, make it like to give an exemption for sweat equity. Like if someone has built a business and they sell that business, well, then, yeah, they shouldn't necessarily be taxed as if they made all that money at once. But if you bought a house last year and then you flip it the next year, your profit is only taxed at half the rate. So, if you make $100,000 off of flipping a house, well, you're only taxed as if you made $50,000 that year. And that means you end up paying less, like about a third of the amount than someone that made $100,000 from trading their time every day of the year for money.
Rick, good to hear from you. A lot of conversation these last few callers around taxation, whether there should be more or less of it. Really good to hear from these callers. More of your calls coming up after the CBC News Update here on BC Today. We have an email from Yvette who writes, my main concerns are climate change and the environment, issues which sadly are being dropped as parties and voters are focused on other issues. Of course, without a healthy environment, there would be no economy. And that's an email from Yvette in Comox, BC. And we have another email, more emails as well coming to BC Today at cbc.ca. Richard writes from Delta, we are retired seniors in our 70s living on what is a fixed income, namely on pensions. All of our pensions include CPP and old age security are indexed to inflation. We own our house. It won't matter to us which forms government, but we worry that our adult children's futures and our grandkids' futures would be drastically affected if Canadians elect a government that cuts basic programs for families like childcare, dental care, pharmacare, school meals, and other social services. And let's go through some more of your emails now. Bonnie writes, hello, as a baby boomer, now in my dotage, I have been a feminist lefty, which you know about. I live on a good pension and the LOC at my credit union. My worry is that young men and women who have to finally realize that their digital world is a crapshoot, promising the moon and delivering bupkis. Oh yes, we have email, but we get so many, especially if you have a cell phone with text to deal with too, which is why they are always on the phone. Okay, Bonnie, thank you very much for your email as well. BC Today at cbc.ca is our email address. More of your calls coming up after the news update. It's 12:30 now. This is BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very nice to be with you. And yes, the final few days of the election campaign. Monday, April 28th is Election Day in Canada. And so we are taking your calls, asking you, what is the most important issue for your generation? Take more of your calls. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 are our numbers. And we'll go to more of your thoughts coming up after this CBC News update. And here's Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. 3 businesses, including well-known Dayton Boots, have been badly damaged in an early morning fire in East Vancouver. It started in a restaurant around 4 o'clock and quickly spread. No injuries have been reported, but 7 people have been evacuated from a nearby building due to safety concerns. The search has been called off for a man who went missing yesterday after he, a woman, and an infant were thrown overboard while boating on Finlayson Arm, northwest of Victoria. Officials say the woman and her infant were found on the shore and rescued. However, 43-year-old Ryan Mazar remains missing. And Vancouver is going to be home to a new professional women's hockey league team. The league has announced the team will start play next year. Home games will be played at the Pacific Coliseum. And now the forecast on the north coast. A mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with a high of 11. Highs reaching 14 with lots of sunshine in the piece. In the central interior, including Prince George, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 14 as well. Highs from 15 to 18 with sunny breaks in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, some sun and cloud with a high of 19. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, mainly sunny this afternoon with highs from 13 to 19 degrees. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC. We are live on Radio 1, live on CBC Television, and live streaming as well on YouTube. Just search for CBC British Columbia. And we are taking your calls, asking you, when it comes to generations, what are the most important election issues for your generation? We are wanting to hear from you. Gen Z, Millennial, Generation X, Baby Boomers. Love to hear your thoughts. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. A lot of emails coming in as well. Hugh writes, I'm a young business owner and I have observed that the carbon tax has affected my lower income client base the hardest. And also Bree writes from Penticton, Gen X here, family of 6 with 4 kids. The biggest issues for my family are taxation and the cost of living. I'm voting for my candidate in Similkameen, South Okanagan, because she was the only council person to vote against increasing our property taxes this past December by 8%. She has since stepped down from Penticton City Council to run federally to be our MP. We need a huge change of government. Robert writes, the biggest problem I have is the lack of research by the public. I see too many comments from those making decisions based on promises instead of actions on the leaders. I'm Gen X and I've seen what the PC, the CPC, and LPC governments have focused on during elections versus what they accomplished, and most importantly, how they actually voted. Today, we have the ability to look back in time and see how did this candidate or party vote on this or that issue. There's really no reason to fall for social media influencers' messaging because at the minimum, it's misleading. At worst, it's outright false or misinformation. Please vote, but also please educate yourself first. And do not be afraid to admit that you might have been misled. That is from Robert. Thanks for your emails, bctoday@cbc.ca. And let's go now to Venus in Kamloops. Hi, Venus. Thanks for calling in. What's an important issue for your generation?
Hi there, Michelle. For me specifically in my generation, I think housing and the cost of living, having it rising as much as it is, it's scary. And I don't know how I'm going to afford rent when I'm older, how everything is being set up right now, and how voting right now is being targeted towards older generations. We're not targeting the younger demographics. It's difficult.
And you belong to the younger generation then, I assume?
Yes, Gen Z.
You're Gen Z. Okay. And is this right, Venus? You're in high school?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And so what are your thoughts about life after high school?
I'm terrified. I'm nervous about how I'm going to afford college, about how I'm going to afford rent, groceries, all of that. It keeps rising. We're not doing enough to address it, and it's scary.
Okay. Venus,
I need rent
go ahead.
control.
Pardon me?
and rent control would be very important, I think.
Okay, rent control. Thank you, Venus. Now that is a provincial issue, and so that would be the purview of the provincial NDP government. Venus, thanks so much for the call from Kamloops. Now there's a young person there still in high school calling us, and we heard from our youth panel. Let's turn now, though, to what seniors would like to see from the election and the next federal government. And we're going to take your calls as well right after this too. Joining us now is Carole Fawcett, a writer and retired counselor, co-founder of the Vernon Seniors Tin Cup organization that's pressuring governments to raise pensions for seniors. Carole, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you very much for thinking of us and asking us. It's lovely and so amazing to have a senior's voice listened to and heard. Thank you.
Oh, I'm very glad to have you on. What are the issues that seniors feel need to be addressed immediately?
The first and foremost issue is an increase in the GIS. Seniors who live below the poverty line, which is $25,000.
Mm-hmm. This is the guaranteed income supplement. My apologies.
Yes, no, that's quite all right. I should have been more clear. The guaranteed income supplement, a lot of seniors are living on under $23,000. I mean, imagine that. You're living under $23,000. Now you have to go to the grocery store to get some groceries. Which ones do you pick? Which ones can you afford? None of them, hardly. And it is ridiculous. And then added to that, of course, we're all very patriotic. We want to buy Canada only, Canadian-made products only, and they're more expensive. It really is, it's very frustrating. It's so frustrating.
What do you make of what you've heard from the party leaders when it comes to seniors and lower income seniors in particular?
What do you mean, what do I make?
What's your reaction? What have you heard anything that resonates with you?
Not really. I mean, there is one party, I suppose, that has mentioned a 5% increase. But, I mean, really, till we say tokenism, I mean, what will 5% do on such a minimal amount to begin with? I suppose it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. But, really, it's insulting. And, again, it's tokenistic. And it's the same with the federal government and the provincial government. They have seniors ministers, and bless their hearts, I guess they do reasonably well, but I haven't seen any difference. So why do they need these people? Just ask a senior. We can tell you what we need, what we don't need.
Yeah, well, yes, and this is why, again, I'm glad to have you on the show. And again, when it comes to GIS, you mentioned that 5% increase. That's the Liberals saying that would lead to more tax-free benefits for low-income seniors. The Conservatives promising to raise the age limit for RRSPs from 71 to 73 and maintain the retirement age. And the NDP promising to increase the GIS again and pharmacare and to cover all medications. Now,
what senior has those extra things? I don't have any RRSPs or I don't have any of that. So, and I'm not alone in that regard. It's not due to bad planning either. It's due to life.
Yeah, we heard from a senior earlier who said he was just waiting for his shot. I assume that he meant he was getting a vaccine. What about healthcare when it comes to seniors in Canada? What are the issues that you would like to see addressed when it comes to healthcare?
We need extended health benefits. Our shingle shots aren't paid, and that's $300 and something because now they've decided that one isn't enough; you need two. So that's a little extra ka-ching there. It's ridiculous. And then hearing aids. I have a 101-year-old mother who uses hearing aids, and we just had a big fuss with them today, trying to get them in and whatnot. And I mean
and they're not covered, right?
Of dollars. No, they're not covered. Mums weren't. Then there's other things too. I could go on and on and on.
Yeah, I know.
Seniors are tired of being invisible, unheard, feeling shamed, and not validated.
So what do you make?
Has come.
What do you make when you hear, I'm not trying to get into this kind of generational competition here, but we hear young people say, we have not been heard in this election or in elections in general. Issues tend to cater older voters because they have been such an important voting bloc. So what do you make of that?
I'm sorry, I giggled because I'm not discounting their concerns. I'm certain, but boomers didn't have everything handed to them. We had to work hard and very hard to get where we got, and I didn't do that well on that apparently because I divorced and got shafted in the process.
Life happened.
Life happened,
Yeah.
Exactly. So and doesn't matter how hard you work or what you do, you can't always avoid that, And I feel sorry. I do. I really feel sorry for young people. It's tough. But, it's really tough when you're older and you have health problems and your energy is impacted. Maybe you have COPD and you have other things that are happening in your body and your life, and you can't quite do it. And then along comes your pitiful little pension every month, and you find you can't afford this and you can't afford that. You can't. It goes on. And I don't mean to whine, although it might sound like I am. But it's a fact.
And yours is an important voice, Carole. And I will also make the point that our youth panel earlier also said they were not discounting the issues that do affect seniors as well. I really appreciate hearing from you this afternoon. Thanks so much for taking our phone call.
Oh, not a problem. Take care.
You too. Carole Fawcett is a writer and retired counselor, co-founder of the Vernon Seniors Tin Cup organization. Okay, let's take some more calls asking you what are the issues that are important to your generation. Bonnie in North Vancouver. Hello. Hi, Bonnie. Okay, we've just lost our connection with Bonnie. Tim in Surrey. Hi, go ahead, Tim.
Hey, I thought I'd touch on a subject that's common to both the youth and older folks, which is housing. Your previous guest already mentioned a lot of the issues that seniors, but housing seems to be one of those that concerns both students, obviously, and young people trying to have a family, but it also affects seniors. And it seems to me you are going to have the rise of the low-income senior coming more and more. So they're going to be competing for space. And this is where I'm confused about jurisdiction, because municipal or provincial, supposedly this is where housing sticks. But you have to remember federally, the federal liberals and the conservative government murdered the national housing program that allowed to build houses which were, quote, affordable. I don't even know what affordable housing means anymore, but it seems to me that Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney want to see the free market take care of that. And from what I understand with Mr. Poilievre this morning, he was talking about removing tent cities. Now, when he talks about that, are you talking about people who are addicted or living in cities, or people who have other issues, cannot afford homes, whether rent, and they're living in their car, or they're living in tents? You're going to take those out, Pierre Poilievre? What are you going to do, put them in jail? So in a weird way, it's the jurisdictional issue that is really stupidly described by all levels of government itself. Thank you.
Tim, thank you for the call. Jen is our final caller on this from Cortes Island. Hi, Jen. Welcome.
Hello. I am calling on behalf of Gen X, who are not boomers, and I'm saying that as a joke because we constantly have to repeat ourselves about that. Hi.
Go ahead.
Much like the woman who was speaking earlier, who is a senior, I'm on the edge of it. I'm at 55. I moved to Cortez in 2016 with somebody. That relationship turned out to be, unfortunately, something that was unhealthy and abusive, and I had to get out of that. My life changed. Similar life changes. My work that normally was as a massage therapist had to no longer happen because I've now been dealing with major health issues for 2 years. I've also been on disability, provincial disability, since 2013 because of health challenges. So I'm single. I live on my own in a cabin that's rustic. I have an outhouse. My rent is very low where I live. I am remote. But what I want to speak to is the reality of being a person with disabilities. At this time, currently, the federal government does not acknowledge the provincial government's same parameters in terms of defining what disabled is. So the conditions that I have, if I try to get the federal government to identify that and see that, they won't, because they still define it as what we pictured back in the day, like person in wheelchair, person who needs 24/7 care, which we all now know that's not only one presentation of disability.
And this affects your access to supports.
I can't get anything. Also, I worked in the arts too, so I don't have a bunch of, what do you call it, Canada, the money that comes off of your paychecks. Like I ran my own business for years, right?
So like
Similar
paying at the
thing.
CPP and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that stuff. And same stuff, right? It's the same issue. I am living on $18,000 a year. And people want to know why I'm complaining about where I live or what's happening in my life. Where am I going to go? Similar to the woman that was speaking before. I don't have any siblings that can help. I don't have parents that are alive. I don't have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have an RSP. I can't get any extra money anywhere except from friends or community supports. That's a big issue.
Yeah, and Jen, clearly, I mean, you're on the edge, as you had said at the start of this call, and I think you're the first person who's raised the issue of people with disabilities. Thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation. That's Jen on Cortes Island. All the best to you, okay? And thank you so much to all of our callers on that conversation. We'll get to more of your emails as well, asking you about the issues important to your generation in this election. Lots more, of course, coverage here on CBC. And more on the day's top stories coming up this afternoon on the afternoon shows in your region. And BC is making for quite the battleground in this election, and a number of nail-biting ridings are there to watch this Monday. On the Coast in Metro Vancouver is digging into one of them. They're also going to talk about the excitement. There's some excitement in women's hockey today. Here's Gloria Makarenko.
Michelle, hi there. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I'd love it if you can join us for On the Coast this afternoon. Of course, we'll have much more coverage of the state of the federal election campaign, and we're going to take you into another local election riding to watch. We'll talk about Port Moody Coquitlam. This is shaping up to be a really close race between the NDP incumbent and the Conservative and Liberal candidates as well. And this is shaping up to be a big day in Vancouver sports history. The city's set to get a professional women's hockey team. So we'll talk more about that. And with the Russian invasion of Ukraine continuing, there is particular concern about the impact of the war on children in Ukraine. And with that in mind, there's an event planned on Granville Island this Saturday. It's a market all day long and then a concert Saturday night at the Arts Club to raise money for the children of Odessa, Vancouver's sister city in Ukraine. So we'll talk all about that this afternoon. I hope you can join us between 3 and 6 for On the Coast.
Gloria, thank you very much. You can hear On the Coast this afternoon on CBC Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver. You can also listen and watch on the CBC News app. It's 12:49 now. This is BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very good to be with you this afternoon. And to other news now. Interest in Americans wanting to move to Canada has increased since Donald Trump was reelected as U.S. president. And following executive orders from the president asserting only 2 genders and pledging to end diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, there are also increases in LGBTQ plus Americans wanting to come to Vancouver and Canada. Connie Campbell is an immigration lawyer with Edelmann in Vancouver and joins me now. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks very much for being with us. What is the interest that you're seeing among Americans?
Certainly, there's been a marked increase in the number of queer people from the States trying to come up to Canada. There's been some discussion, particularly in the trans community, about the possibility of claiming protection, claiming or asylum, or making a refugee claim in Canada. I've definitely had a number of different conversations, particularly with the parents of transgender children, from all over the states, but particularly from states where access to healthcare for minors has been severely restricted. They've really been trying to, pull out all the stops and work out all the options to make it up to Canada or make it anywhere in the world that might be safe.
Can you tell me a bit? I'm sure you won't be able to talk about specific clients or specific calls, but generally, what are those conversations like? What are the concerns that they are raising with you?
I mean, the day-to-day concerns are perhaps unsurprisingly just the uncertainty that they're facing. That's the biggest thing, and it varies really widely state by state how fast different states are sort of implementing or trying to follow Trump's executive orders, or implementing their own laws. There's some legislation in Texas that's tabled that could make it effectively fraud to present yourself in public as a gender other than that assigned at birth, which many are seeing would make it illegal to be transgender in the state of Texas. Given how fast everything's moving, though, everyone's just worried, and it makes it really difficult as a lawyer to provide accurate and up-to-date advice. So I spend a lot of time trying to follow what's happening more than anything, and just kind of walking people through the situation as it stands, and then all of Canada's different immigration pathways.
Well, there it is. So you said that they are looking at options and how they can perhaps seek asylum. Is that possible?
Anyone who feels that they are unsafe in their country of origin or their country of nationality has the right under international law to seek asylum in any country that's a signatory to the Refugee Convention. Canada is one of those countries, so anyone from the States could technically come up, and there have been people in the past, even before Trump, who've come to Canada and made claims for refugee protection here. Generally, though, there are a number of barriers that Americans face in refugee claims. There are very, very few, vanishingly few successful refugee claims against the United States, primarily for two issues. One being that there's a presumption that your home state will protect you, and not just the federal government, but state governments, local governments come into that as well. And there's even more important in this case, something called an internal flight alternative. Basically, you have to assert a risk against every part of your home country. That's all 50 states. There are many states where it is still relatively easy or equivalently safe to be trans in the US as it is in much of Canada. So it's hard to make those cases, and I've certainly cautioned people about that consistently since Trump's election.
Have you launched anything of that ilk?
I can't talk about individual cases.
Fair, that's fair. Then if that's kind of the success rate has been difficult, as you say, there are obstacles. What are the other options for them then?
Just like any other American, queer people from the States looking to come to Canada can come in under, first they can come up as visitors, as many people do, spend some time here, cool off, make a plan to relocate elsewhere in the United States if they need to. They can come up as students if they get admission to a Canadian higher learning institution that is designated by the government as allowed to accept international students. There's been some restrictions on those programs, as you've likely covered.
Yes.
And you can come up as a worker. You can come up with a job as long as your employer gets a labor market impact assessment that allows them to offer a job to a foreigner. They can come up under some labor market impact assessment exempt programs, like under the US, Canada, Mexico trade agreement. There's a few other sort of open work permit options for Americans, but we don't have something like the youth mobility programs that we have with most European or OECD countries. We've never offered that option to Americans.
And does the fact that Canada is in this kind of tariff trade war with the United States and CUSMA, which is that free trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. is going to be at some point next year renegotiated, does that turn those options into, make them uncertain as well?
As of now, the program is still operating.
Yeah.
So if you can qualify under the CUSMA professionals list, and can get a job in Canada, you're very likely to be able to come up. Despite the trade war, that agreement remains in place and it's being respected. That could change at any time, really. If the two parties just decide that the treaty's been so violated and they just want to toss it, it's a possibility, but it hasn't happened yet. So again, it's uncertain like everything else right now.
Yeah. One other thing that is uncertain, but it's so good to hear the sort of the practicalities that you come across every day. This is not your jurisdiction, because then we would be talking to an American immigration lawyer, but we've been hearing from people who are LGBTQ plus here, who have some concerns about traveling to the United States. What are you hearing going the other way?
Certainly, anecdotally, you hear a lot of stories about people facing increased scrutiny at the border. I'd want to start and say that entry into the United States for Canadians, for anyone who's not an American, has always been discretionary. We feel, because we are, especially in Vancouver, able to cross the border all the time, that you have a right to enter. You don't. An individual border services officer looks at you and decides, is this person really coming in as a visitor, or are they here to work? Are they here to break our rules? Or do they not have the authorization for what they're trying to enter for? That's just been cranked up, and there's a degree to which it seems like the gloves are off, or there's no longer a fear among CBP officers, that's Customs and Border Patrol. These officers now know that they're not going to face any discipline if they're extremely harsh. So there have certainly been anecdotes of people with temporary statuses like visas or work permits getting those torn up, even in Canadian airports, as they try to clear customs over stray comments about political issues or other concerns. But for many people, it's the border's a cause of anxiety for queer people, trans people, people of color, people born in Afghanistan or Iran, Russia. All these people face heightened scrutiny, and the U.S. border has always been a site of a lot of difficulty for these people, and it's really just kind of ramped up and expanded to a wider category of Canadians.
Do you expect to get even more calls, or those calls to continue?
They don't seem to stop.
They don't seem to stop. Your work is cut ahead. You've got your work cut out for you. I really appreciate you talking us through this current issue, and I really appreciate you coming into studio as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Real pleasure for me as well. That is Connie Campbell, an immigration lawyer based in Vancouver with Edelmann. This is BC Today here on CBC, and we have a lot of emails coming in on the election as well. So we're going to put those together for you for tomorrow rather. I do have one here now from Jennifer, who writes, I am on the border of Gen X and Gen Z. Generally someone who is behind the NDP, as social environmental issues are important to me. I have 2 young children. My riding in Kamloops, the previous NDP candidate has switched to the Liberal Party for the same reasons that I voted for them. And I know it looks like I have also been pleased with how Mark Carney, she writes, has dealt with Trump on the world stage. And that is from Jennifer writing us. Thanks for the email.